Decades from now, huddled around a campfire, you'll be telling your grandchildren stories about the console wars. When you get around to the 8th generation, where Team Blue stood up on stage and coyly demonstrated the advantages their new PlayStation had over Team Green's overpriced VCR, your audience will ask you, is that it? That's how we won the console wars? Second-hand games? That's it? No, that was just the first salvo. It's soldiers that win wars, kids, and these were Sony's best. The top 10 exclusive... Okay, here are the rules. No remasters, no compilations, no ports. If you can buy the game for another system in this or any previous generation, it's not on the list. Number 10. Marvel's Spider-Man. It's a truth evident to fanboys across the world that where Marvel rules the cinema, DC owns gaming. The Batman Arkham series are modern classics that don't require a comic book collection to appreciate. Meanwhile, on the Marvel side of the coin, 2018's Spider-Man game finally gave the comic book juggernaut a commercial success to match that of their movies, and they only had to borrow a few Arkham mechanics to do it. In keeping with the appeal of the hero himself, Spider-Man's storyline straddles not only the grand, epic battle of good versus evil, but also the everyday struggles of a relatable young New Yorker and his relatable New Yorker problems. Side quests involving everyday hero tasks, collectibles and challenges encourage you to explore the game's gorgeous NYC setting, which, thanks to the game's intuitive movement controls, is less of a tedious exercise and more of a pleasant way to pass the time. As hinted before, gameplay borrows some elements from the Arkham series, with the fluid combat system in particular owing some credit. However, this is purely a sensible decision on developer Insomniac's part, as it allows the player to feel like a stone-cold badass superhero without requiring hours of practice. Spider-Man is of course not a carbon copy and throws in its own ideas using various web-based combat styles and gadgets that harken to something MCU's Tony Stark might have concocted. Spider-Man reset the bar for Marvel games going forwards, hopefully banishing the memory of mediocre Iron Man movie tie-ins to the history books, and giving the gaming public high hopes for the currently in production Avengers game. Spider-Man holds a Metascore of 87. Number 9. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Whoa, don't look at me like that, I don't make the rules. Okay, I did make the rules, but in my defense, Final Fantasy VII for PS4 is most definitely a remake, as no single asset is shared with the original 1997 game. And what a game that was, being the JRPG that single-handedly introduced a generation of gamers to PlayStation as a platform, JRPGs as a genre, and established the Final Fantasy saga as a leading franchise within that genre. A Final Fantasy VII remake has been high on gamers' wishlists for so long it's almost meme-worthy. It took a further 5 years for Square Enix to deliver the final product. The size of the project seemingly snowballed, meaning the full content of the original epic game is now being stretched out into potentially a further 2 chapters. As it stands, the first chapter in FF7 Remake is a reimagining of the beginning of the game, reintroducing us to the characters and game world and adding some new content to ensure that there's more than just a simple retreading of the old story. Character backstories are more fully fleshed out, and the morality of a tale of freedom fighters versus evil corporation is a little less black and white than in the past. The new combat system varies substantially from the original game, resulting in an unusual hybrid gameplay style that is part traditional turn-based strategy and part fast-paced action. As with recreating any beloved piece of art, Square Enix have made some unpopular decisions. Some changes in the name of fanservice that probably did more harm than good, and some content added in the name of padding out the runtime that feels like content added to pad out the runtime. Nevertheless, despite a gamer score that has been heavily affected by zero-score review bombs by disgruntled fans, the critic score of 87 reflects a great, but not perfect remake of a historic game. Number 8. Nioh. Pardon me while I preload a few coins into the Dark Souls comparison swear jar, but in this case it's warranted. Like many other developers in recent years, Team Ninja decided to pay homage to From Software's celebrated series with this Soulsborne set in Sengoku, Japan. Nioh places you in control of a fictionalised version of real-life Western samurai, William Adams. Gameplay borrows certain familiar mechanisms from its predecessors, like precise methodical combat, epic boss fights, and the weirdly iconic method of saving that also respawns enemies, but also introduces its own spin on the formula with combo attacks and stances. While the sheer number of controls to learn can be intimidating, Nioh guides you through the process with a number of tutorials and some optional training missions to help familiarise you with the game's more complex systems. The story is a surprisingly light, charming affair for those who are maybe expecting a dark, oppressive theme. William's story is an alt history take on the Warring States period of Japanese history, but a sort of Assassin's Creed version where the protagonist is fairly close to his real world self, but also has a bunch of secret superpowers, meets other legendary figures, and fights mythical creatures. While graphically competent enough, it's arguable that Nioh's visual style is less identifiable than the games that inspired it. Overall, Nioh has been received well and is a great palate cleanser for Dark Souls fans, and has scored 88 on Metacritic. Number 7. Dreams. Games for creating games has been a fringe industry within the wider gaming landscape for a long time. I remember being intrigued and ultimately frustrated by the concept when I tried shoot 'em up construction kit on my Commodore as a kid in the early 90s. More recent game creators like Gary's Mod have been born out of the modding community and have had their own level of associated jankiness that is all part of the charm. Dreams brings the spirit of such game creator tools in a more polished, contemporary package that integrates modern aspects like communities and collaboration. Dreams, for a start, is not just a game creator. You are presented with a full-on single-player game that encompasses several genres and more than adequately exhibits the possibilities of what can be achieved. Beyond that, if you're still not ready to create, you can explore the community library and play other users' games or view their works of art, either to appreciate their work or gain inspiration for your own. Once you've found your inspiration, the game's excellent tutorials teach you the basic principles, and from there you can use pre-made templates or download assets from the community to help build your masterpiece. As a creative package, it's about as comprehensive and user-friendly as a console-based game maker could be, but the true value is derived from the user. The largely positive critical reception for Dreams has generated an aggregate score of 89. Number 6. Horizon Zero Dawn. Third-person games have developed to a stage where there's a familiarity to them. From Breath of the Wild to Witcher, there's a specific look and feel that makes these cinematic third-person games a genre in themselves. Horizon Zero Dawn is perhaps an archetype of this subgenre, combining fluid movement with strategic combat, role-playing and light stealth mechanics. Set in a far-flung post-apocalypse many generations after the end of the civilization we know, you play as Aloy, a young tribal woman in what was once the United States, surviving in a wilderness populated by robotic creatures that have adapted to fill the roles left vacant by biological animals. The story builds further upon this intriguing premise, following Aloy's progress as a hunter and her quest to discover more about her own origins, building the world of the post-apocalypse along the way. The main gameplay arc is similar to that of the Monster Hunter series, requiring the player to build up an arsenal of tools and weapons before taking on the game's larger beasts and defeating them by identifying weak points. All of this is rendered in exquisite detail and with fantastic colour and depth, providing some of the best visuals this console generation, and that have probably sold more than a few PS Pros. Horizon Zero Dawn has proven itself a hit with critics and audiences alike, making a Sony star out of Aloy, and earning its forthcoming sequel pride of place in the PS5 announcement lineup. The Metascore for the first game in what is now the Horizon series stands at 89, however in the next few weeks, Horizon Zero Dawn is destined to lose its exclusive status, with a Steam release vaguely penciled in for summer 2020. If you're enjoying the video so far and want to show your support for the channel, a like would be appreciated, and you can keep up to date with my latest uploads by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. Cheers. Number 5. Bloodborne. If the popular perception of Victorian Europe weren't already dark and gothic enough, allow From Software, the studio behind the seminal Dark Souls series, to make things even darker for you. Bloodborne is set in the city of Yarnam, whose cobbled streets are roamed by victims of the Bloodborne plague that is turning them into hideous monsters and seemingly driving everyone else mad. The player's character is one such victim, trapped by a contract in which your cure in the form of a blood transfusion is given in exchange for your services as a hunter, tasked with ridding the city of the plague and defeating the Great Ones, a series of the typically varied and grotesque bosses the studio is known for. Your hunter has a customizable appearance and user-defined backstory, the latter of which affects your playstyle towards a more combat or stealth-based approach. Combat differs a little from previous Souls games, being more focused on offensive play, with shields being virtually replaced with offhand firearms. Your character's less of a damage sponge too, with no blocking to speak of. You're forced to dodge and parry attacks to survive. Melee combat is more nuanced too, with the player able to mix light and heavy attacks to form combos. Opinions in the community are mixed as to whether Bloodborne is inferior or equal to the Souls series, particularly whether the game is too easy. However, the darkly intriguing narrative, bleak yet attractive visual style and rewarding gameplay have appealed greatly to reviewers, giving it an aggregate score of 92. Number 4. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. This series has become Sony's signature blockbuster franchise. With each new entry in the saga, returning audiences can rely on an Uncharted game for a thrilling story, gorgeous locations and perfectly optimised gameplay. Critics, however, might have come to expect a fairly linear experience, with little in the way of replay value for those who derive value from the number of hours they can spend playing. And in that regard, Uncharted 4 isn't entirely a surprise. However, developers Naughty Dog have clearly been listening to their detractors and made this the least linear, most grown-up feeling entry in the series to date. While the explosive set pieces are still there, and levels still couldn't be mistaken for Hitman 2, Uncharted 4 gives you more freedom in your approach to gameplay than ever before. Many goals have multiple approaches and solutions, and stealth remains an option for those who prefer not to go loud for every encounter. The graphics and animation are typically groundbreaking, truly showcases of what can be done with the PlayStation 4. Of particular note are the character models, whose detail and realism make you wonder just how much closer we can get to perfection in creating human-like characters in interactive media. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End proudly flies the flag for Team Blue as the 4th highest rated exclusive on the platform, scoring 93 on Metacritic. Number 3. God of War. The God of War franchise was hardly in need of redemption in the eyes of gamers. Although in its PS3 heyday it was the father of 100 bad copies and myriad spin-offs of its own, and the formula might have become a little stale, the series never had its Angel of Darkness moments. This 2018 soft reboot then was less of a change out of necessity to save a failing or irrelevant franchise, but a creative decision by a team looking to push the medium forward despite risking alienating the series fanbase altogether. It was a sizable gamble, and it paid off. Kratos has moved hundreds of miles from mythical Greece to mythical Scandinavia, where he's settled down with a wife, child and beard. We join the game with Kratos and son at a funeral. Kratos' second wife Faye has died, and with her dying wish, asked her husband to scatter her ashes from the highest mountain in the land. So begins a father-son bonding exercise in the form of a bloody, visceral rampage through a host of assorted enemies. This time around, Kratos has abandoned his signature chained blades in favour of a magical axe that doesn't have a name, I mean that would be a bit much, but does return when summoned, making for some incredibly satisfying combat. God of War is perhaps the gaming equivalent of Logan, a movie that took a creative decision to walk away from its successful but creatively unfulfilling past trappings, whilst honouring their memory in a way that should keep most fans satisfied. Critics of course love this newer, more grown-up God of War, earning it a Metascore of 94. Number 2. The Last of Us Part 2. So, this is the reason this video has taken me about twice as long as normal to make. I originally scripted the video a week before the release of The Last of Us Part 2 without it. The original number 10 was MLB The Show 19, and I'm grateful I didn't have to start the list talking about the generic sports sim at least. However, I happened to notice that early reviews of The Last of Us Part 2 were pretty exceptional, with many outlets giving it the maximum score possible, so I thought it would be worth delaying the video until some more information came in. Well, I'm glad I waited. Firstly, some reviews came in that didn't gel with the rest of the consensus. Nothing unusual about that, you might say. Even reviewers have different opinions, and some publications are known for their hot takes on particular topics. The user scores seem to have been quite clearly review bombed, with more 0 out of 10 scores delivered in a single day than most games get user scores in their entire lifetime. However, after watching a few video reviews in the last few days, it seems clear that there's something extremely polarising about The Last of Us Part 2. As it is such a new and anticipated release, I won't be going too in-depth about the game itself. It is of course the sequel to 2013's The Last of Us, that generation's most critically acclaimed zombie horror game that told a better post-apocalypse story than the entire Walking Dead TV series. This game takes place 4 years from the original, with that game's companion character Ellie promoted to protagonist. The graphics and sound are close to cutting edge for this generation, and the gameplay is an evolution of the original. Levels are a little more open than before, in the same way that Naughty Dog's other entry on this list is more open, but the game is still fairly linear. The main point of contention seems to centre around the story. Again, I don't intend to offer up any spoilers, I actually don't know that much about the story, but I understand that some reviewers took issue with the dissonant tone between what happens in the gameplay and what happens in the story. Also, if you're an animal lover, this ain't your game, Chief. I'm somewhat hesitant to get to the point of this entry in the list, but here we are. The Last of Us Part 2 currently holds the joint highest score on Metacritic of 95. And at the same time, a user score that might actually put it on my 10 worst list. Subscribe to the channel to see that when it comes out. The net effect of these two disparate scores effectively cancel each other out. As of right now, it seems impossible for a consumer to know if they should play The Last of Us Part 2 or not. It's either a peerless work of art, or a hilariously bad mess. Number 1. Persona 5 Royal. The original Persona 5 was widely heralded as a groundbreaking title, with a light-hearted exterior that portrayed its deep, thoughtful themes and superb genre-defining gameplay, and if I'd chosen to include it on this list, it would have tied with Uncharted 4 with a Metascore of 93. However, this year developer Atlus released Persona 5 Royal, and well, it's the same game, with some refinements that smooth out gameplay, and some newly added content that, granted, is beneficial enough to be worthy of a higher score. To me, it feels like a bit of a money grab. It costs the same as Persona 5, and owners of the original game can't move over DLC purchases or even saves to Royal. If you're going to buy a copy of Persona 5 from the PlayStation Store in 2020, there's absolutely no reason to buy the original version, and if you pick up a good deal on a physical copy, you'll still feel shortchanged knowing that there's a better version of the game available. Anyway, enough griping. Persona 5 Royal once again casts the player as Joker, a high school student by day and secret mind-invading dream warrior by night. During the day you perform normal student tasks, attending lessons, participating in leisure activities, building relationships, etc. Far from merely the basis of a high-quality social simulator, however, your day activities are used to prepare you for your experiences at night. After class, you and your party venture into the minds of bad people as they sleep in order to inception them into becoming good people by way of a dungeon crawl through the palaces of their subconscious. Critics have lauded Persona 5 as the almost perfect incarnation of a JRPG, and P5 Royal builds on that with refined mechanics and an expanded story. However you feel about a developer double dipping into their audience's bank accounts, this newer, bigger, better Persona 5 earned a Metascore of 95, up 2 points from the original, and holds the number 1 spot for the best PS4 exclusive ever made. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go take another shower. Wow, that was a hell of a list. I've never felt so disinclined to recommend the number 1 and number 2 games on our list before. This one took a lot of time to write, so I'd appreciate some love down below, if you take my meaning. Nudge nudge. I of course mean like, subscribe, notification bell, comment, all those usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.